Last week, as we enter into numbers, I just gave a little bit of introductions as to where the title number came from. So I started to talk about, you know, different versions of the Bibles and how Bible translation came about. So I talked about, Septuagint. I talked about, different versions of it. So that was the origin of how this title of the book came about. So I also mentioned about how Hebrew Bible names this particular book. Do you remember the name of the book? I'm asking too much, right? Yeah. That's okay. It's not really. It's not really important. Yeah, Bet Midbar. Yeah, Bet Midbar. Yeah, which means in the wilderness. And an interesting part of this. Is that uh, this Midbar. It's actually it's Bamidbar means in the wilderness, but Midbar itself, the word Midbar is actually a noun, and the Midbar means mouth. So how did the mouth came to a wilderness? Right? Midbar means, but this Midbar actually origin from the word dabar. Dabar means speak. So you might think, wait a second. Dabar is a speaks, and midbar is mouth. Then where does this in wilderness came about? So when you actually look at the Song of Songs, chapter 4. So, Song of Solomon. Not Song of Songs. Songs of Solomon. When you turn to Song of Solomon's chapter 4, verse 3, this is how it goes. Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like helbs of pomegranates behind your veil. So, in this context, and your mouth is lovely, this mouth is midbar. It's the same word. So, what does that really mean? And, why is that Be Midbar is in the wilderness, and Midbar is mouth, and Dabar, which is the original word, and where it came from, the rooted from, is actually Dabar, which means speak. Interesting part is when you read Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, there are some common the common things that keep popping up in those three books, and including the Deuteronomy as well. One of the most commonly used expressions in these books are this. Numbers chapter 1, verse 19. It says, As the Lord commanded Moses, So he listed them in the wilderness of Sinai. So when Lord commanded Moses, so as the Lord commanded Moses, so what it means is Moses always did what God told him to do. He did not deviate from what God told him. He always stick to and exactly did what God told him to do. When we were learning about tabernacle, he did not expand from what God told him to do. He did exactly what God told him to do. And this expression and it continues throughout these books. It said, as the Lord commanded Moses. What does it mean? And throughout the life of wilderness, what did they learn? Is this, which is the most critical part of numbers. If I have to pick one most important, what is the essence of numbers? If I have to pick one, I will pick this. I want you to turn to Numbers chapter 9. I want you to turn to chapter 9. If someone asks me, which is the most important things that we have to learn from numbers, I would say this. We're going to read from Numbers chapter 9, verse 15 through 23. So I want you to pay attention. On the day that the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony. And at evening it was over the tabernacles like the appearance of a fire until morning. So it was always the cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And whenever the cloud lifted from over the tent, after that the people of Israel set out. And in the place where the cloud settled down, there are people of Israel camped. At the command of the Lord, the people of Israel set out. And at the command of the Lord they camped. As long as the cloud rested over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. Even when the cloud continued over the tabernacle many days, the people of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not set out. Sometimes the cloud was a few days over the tabernacle, and according to the command of the Lord they remained in camp. Then according to the command of the Lord they set out. And sometimes the cloud remained from evening until morning, and when the cloud lifted in the morning they set out. Or if it continued for a day and a night, when the cloud lifted they set out. Whether it was 2 days, or a month, or a longer time, that the cloud continued over the tabernacle, abiding there, and the people of Israel remained in camp and did not set out. But when it lifted they set out. At the command of the Lord they camped, and at the command of the Lord they set out. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by Moses. This is very, very, very important. I want you to think about it. 2 things. Number 1, they're living in the wilderness for almost 40 years. So how's the life in wilderness? Is that pleasant life? There's lots of things to do, like it's exciting. Is it? It's all right. In the wilderness, there's all kinds of things that is dangerous things. There's fiery, the serpents are there, scorpions, right? There's all kinds of deadly things that are in the desert. Weather is scorching hot, no water, nothing around, there is no food, right? It is not an exciting place to be. I remember the story that I heard from someone that I used to know a while back, and he wanted to experience the life in wilderness. So there is some sort of a desert experience tour. So he wanted to try it out for 5 days to see how Israelites lived in a desert for 5 days. So he just took he wanted to take 5-day course. So there was a 1-day course, there's a 3-day course, and there's a 5-day course. So he wanted to experience the 5-day course. And the person who was answering the call asked him, can you tell me are you a like aggressive person, or like are you a like somewhat like soft person? Like, and the person that I know is like, why are you asking this question? And he said, the Torah says it is a very, very important factor in order for us to consider how many days you're going to be, what programs you're going to take. So and he responded and said, I'm like an angel. I said, really? I said, yeah, don't worry about it. Like, I'm pretty calm. I'm a like very nice person. And after almost 30 minutes of interview, and he concluded that, he said, sir, I think you should just take 1-day course. And I said, what do you mean? I want to take 5-day course. I want to experience 5 days in the life of wilderness. And I said, well, why are you telling me that I should go with the 1 days? Based on assessment that I have done, I think it's more appropriate for you to just go through the 1-day tour rather than a 5-day tour. And then he kept fighting, and it's like, no, I don't want 1 day. I want 5 days. So they finally negotiated that they do 3 days tour rather than 1 day or 5 days. So they negotiated a 3-day course. So there's a lot of story happen in that the 3 days, but I can't explain all of those. But I just tell you 2 things. Number one, on the very first day that he was actually went on the tour, he was actually wearing sneakers. First day, and a half day into the desert experience, he felt like his sneaker, the bottom piece was falling apart. It was so hot, and it was start to melt. Right? He was so afraid that he didn't bring the second pair of shoes or anything like that, and the bottom piece of the sneaker was falling apart. He was so afraid. And then, towards the late afternoon on the very first day, he was laying down and told the guide, the tour guide, and said, "Bring me back, bring me back." So the tour guy said, "I told you that you could only do 1 day." And then he said, he was like, "Bring me back." And I said, "No, we can't go back now. It's too late. We cannot go back." So he had to go. He can't go back. He had to go because the people who actually brought him in, and they left, and we can't go back. And he actually gone through those 3 days. He said, it was the most deadly experience that I ever had in my life. I will never go back to. I mean, he actually gave like 30 minutes of a testimonial that he was experiencing during that time. It was so hilarious and so funny. I wish I could explain all that story, but but anyway, the desert life is not something that you would enjoy. Definitely not enjoy. And from here, when they stay in the wilderness, there is the pillar of a cloud and pillar of a fire that kind of led them to where they supposed to go. But interestingly, they don't have a compass, or they don't have a map. They don't know where they're going, right? They just went wherever there's a pillar of a cloud and a pillar of fire led them to go. And imagine, when the pillar of a cloud lifts up from the tent of tabernacle, or the pillar of fire lifts it up in the middle of it, and then starts to move, what do they have to do? They have to move. Exactly. No, there's no, right. Yeah, there's no, pre-announcements, or like, the few days on that, just like notification goes out. No, it's nothing like that. When it starts to come up, we don't know when it's going to come up and start to move. And then all you have to do is pack up everything. You have to just get ready to move. So from that perspective, yeah. Yeah, there's a people who tell people like it's moving, right? It doesn't matter. It's like what time it is, right? When, it doesn't really matter. Whenever it lifts up and start to move, everyone's got to move. They don't know why, right? God does not give explanation. It's like, oh, by the way, such and such time we're going to have to move because blah blah blah. No, He doesn't give any reason. They don't know why they're moving. What time they're moving is just clueless. Where they're going, they don't know. They absolutely have zero information. Right? They all have to do is just pack up. The question is this: if you have to continue to pack up and continue to move, imagine, would you like to actually have something that settles in at the very strong and it takes a long time to, pack up? Or something like you wanted to have a very quick tent that you were going to move very soon, so you prepare yourself that you don't want something like settle in, but there's something very quick that you can just pack it up so quickly and then pack up and move. People will be, right, they make it as simple as possible, because this is not the place where they're going to stay for a long time. Right? They always get ready to move. That's the part. That's the life of the wilderness is always ready to move, because they absolutely have zero information as to when they're going to move, how long they're going to stay. It's just they always have to prepare themselves to move. And when is it moving? When the pillar of a cloud lifts up and move, or a pillar of a fire starts move, then they gotta move. And imagine, the person, the Israelite, said, "Oh man, today's not a good day. I'd like to settle in a little more. I just don't want to move. I don't feel like to move today. And you go on. I'll stay. If you stay, what happened?" Exactly. You die. There's no protection. There's no protection from all this the deadly things. You don't have any protections from the sun. You don't have any protections from the water. You don't have any food. So you'll die. Right? So you have to move. It's not by your choice. It's not something that you want or you don't. It's just you move, period. Right? And what if, pillar of a cloud starts to move and, everyone pack up and then start to move. And then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, the pillar of a cloud stops. Then what do? You stop and you settle in there, and then you just make sure that you get ready to get sleep or whatever you have to just do to you put the tent in. All right? And then let's say there's an Israelite that said, you know what? Why don't we just keep going? Let's not stop here. Let's keep moving here, right? And then if you want to settle in here, so be it. I'm going. So he just continues to move on. What happens to that person? You die. Whether you decide to stay while everyone is moving, you will die. Or if everyone is to settle in you continue to move on, you're going to die. One way or another. If you don't stay with the pillar of a cloud and pillar of a fire, you're dead. It's not by your choice. It is wherever this pillar of a cloud leads, or pillar of a fire leads you, you follow. Pillar of a cloud goes on the north, and it said, you know what? I feel like to go to the east or the west or the south. You die. You don't set the direction, right? It is not where you want to go. Where you want to be, it's just, it doesn't really matter. You go wherever this pillar of a cloud goes, period. You always be ready to move. And settle in whenever it stops. You just simply don't know whether you're going to stay there for like a few hours or whether you're going to stay for like, a few days or months. You don't know. But you always have to prepare yourself when you're going to move. Now, if that's the case, there are a few things we can learn from this. You move wherever God leads you. You don't stay when God leads you. You walk along with Him. When He says stop, you stop. When He moves, you move. That is the key part of this numbers. You do it the way God leads you. You don't deviate from there. You don't do what you want, but you do where God leads you. Like I said, you don't know where you're going. Where you are doesn't really matter. You always prepare to move. That's the key part of numbers. That's what they learned for 40 years. When God moves, you move. When God stops, you stop. No other alternative. This is what they learn. That's the key part of it. We actually learned this in Exodus. Yes. So let's see. So when we were learning Exodus, we learned the fact that Moses did exactly what God told him to do. Not making his opinions about how it should be designed and how it should be built. He did not have his own opinions about it. He just did exactly what Lord told him to do. Okay, so coming back to chapter 1. So, as I mentioned, midbar is a mouth, dabar is a speak, which means in the wilderness, you do it the what God told them to do. That's what they learn. In this world, what are we learning? We are learning what we do what God told us to do. So how do we know what God told us to do then? How do we... Exactly. Through the Bible. This is what God told us to do. That's what we learn. In the wilderness, which is that this life is the wilderness for us. We always want to do what we want to do. We go wherever we want to go, rather than what God wants us to do. Right? We go on a tangent. We don't know where God is taking us. We don't see the pillar of a cloud, right? So we just go on our way. But if you know the Word, you hear what God told us to do, and then you follow Him. That's the difference between people who knows the Word versus who doesn't. If you don't know the Word, obviously you don't know what God told you. So therefore, you just go on your way because you simply don't know where God is taking you. All right? Important part of this number is a somewhat interesting. So the title of this book is In the Wilderness. So we kind of assumed that this story of Numbers is about the 40 years of experience. But it's not really 40 years, but somewhere between like 38 years or maybe 39 years of their wilderness life. But when you read this book of Numbers, how many chapters in here? He's got 36 books, right? Not 36 books, 36 chapters here, right? But let's take a look at so let's turn to Numbers chapter 14 for a second. When you look at the Numbers chapter 14, this number chapter 14 comes right after they sent a spy to Canaan. And they came back and they gave a report, right? And then after 10 people came back and say, well, this is a great place, but we can't go in there. Except Joshua and Caleb said, yeah, we can go in. So they started to complain about this. Remember last week I mentioned, when did this happen? Is it at the beginning of the journey, the middle of the journey? Is it the end of the journey? What is it? It's the beginning of the journey, right? Because in chapter 1, he counts the people. Prepare to go in to land of Canaan, right? That's why God counted all these people. But after they went in and came back, gave the wrong report, the God said, for those 40 days that you spied in the land of Canaan, I'm going to count each day as a year. So you're going to be living in wilderness for 40 years, right? So that's how they lived the wilderness for 40 years. So that happened at the beginning of the journey, right after they came out of Egypt. So out of chapter 36 that we just saw, right? Out of chapter 36, if we are into chapter 14, almost at the middle of the book, right? Almost. It's not there, but it's almost the middle of the book. And still, we're talking about the beginning of the journey. Okay? So, if up to chapter 14, if the number is still talking about the beginning of the journey, when are they going to talk about the rest of the 40 years? Right? Continue on. So let's jump to Numbers 20. It says, "And the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there." So, is that the beginning of the journey, middle of the journey, at the end of the journey? At the beginning of the journey? So the Miriam died at the beginning of the journey? So let's take a look at the same chapter, verse 22 and on. "And they journeyed from Kadesh, and the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came to Mount Hor. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron at the Mount Hor, and the border of the land of Edom, Let Aaron be gathered to his people, and he shall not enter the land that I have given to the people of Israel, because you rebelled against my command at the water of Meribah. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garment, and put them on Eleazar his son, and Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and shall die there." So right after Miriam died, Aaron died. Once again, is it the beginning of the journey, middle of the journey, at the end of the journey? Beginning? Anyone else? So, this is the end of the journey, right before they enter into the promised land. This is what happened. It's the tail end of the 40 years now. Right before, like they're almost getting into the promised land, and that's where the Miriam died, that's where and Aaron died. Okay? So, if chapter 26, so they do a second census. So they recount the people right before they enter into the promised land. So then, wait a second. Chapter 14 was the very beginning of the year, right? That happened right after they actually, they sent the spies to the Canaan, and then came out and the people started to rebel. So that's the beginning of the journey. And then a few chapters later, they're talking about end of the journey, right before they enter into the promised land. So then, we're scratching our heads. Wait a second. What happened to those 38 years of their wilderness life? Well, this book is about in the wilderness. It's about the story of the wilderness, right? So we assume there is a detailed story of what happened during those 40 years of their journey. But what we're seeing is not the story, of those 40 years. What we saw was the beginning of the journey, and then jumps to the end of the journey. Then what happens is somewhere in between. What happens in those times? Is there anything happen? Of course there's a lot of things happen. But what happened to the middle of the journey? How come there's only a beginning of the journey and the end of the journey? What happens to the one in the middle? So if it is the beginning of the journey at the end of the journey, which means it only talks about what happened at the beginning and what happened at the end. So, why is the book Numbers only talks about the beginning and the end, not in the middle? Of course, most of the people don't even realize that that's how it is. But that's, as I just showed you before, Number only talks about the beginning and the end, and there's no. So it's like there's a head, there's the tail, but there's no body. Why is that? That's what matters? It's not about how you lived in the wilderness. As I pointed out, as I pointed out before, what was the most important part of this this book, Numbers? Chapter 9. Yeah. Whenever the pillar of a cloud moves, you move. When is the pillar of the cloud stops, you stop. So it's not about what you did in the wilderness. What's most important is how you started the journey and how you ended the journey. That's important. What you did in the middle, when you think about what happened in the middle, all you did was a complaint. That's all you did, and you kept complaining. That's all you did. Even though they rebel, even though they complain, God still leads them, making sure they get into the promised land. So let's come back to Numbers. So Number chapter 1 talks about we're going to read from chapter 1 verse 2. Take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel by clans, by father's house, according to the number of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward. All the Israel who are able to go to war, you and Aaron shall list them company by company, and there shall be with you a man from each tribe. Each man brings the head of the house of his father. And these are the names of the men who shall assist you. From Reuben, Elizur the son of Shedur. From Simeon, Shemuel, and the son of Jerush Hadai. From Judah, Nashon the son Aminadab, and from Issachar, Nathaniel, and son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab the son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, Elishama the son of Amihud, and from Manasseh, and Gamaliel the son of Pedazur. From Benjamin, Abidan the son of Gideoni. From Dan, Ahiezer the son of Ammishaddai. From the Esher, and Pagiel from the son of Okran. From the Gad, Elisab the son of Duel. From the Naphtali, Ahira the son of Enan. These were the ones chosen from the congregation, and the chiefs of their ancestral tribe and heads of the clan of Israel. Moses and Aaron took these men who had been named, and on the first day of the second month they assembled the whole congregation together, who registered themselves by clan, by father's house, according to the number of names from 20 years old and upward, and head by head, as the Lord commanded Moses. So he listed them in the wilderness of Sinai. So when you read this, it's like, who cares? I mean, who cares about like who's the sons? You saw me. Like I can't even name I can't even pronounce their name well. I have to like pay attention. Like, oh, wait a second, what's his name again? It's like Gideoni. Like what is like Ahiezer? Like I don't even know. I can't even like pronounce it very well. Right? So then, is that important to me? Is it important to you when you read this? It's like, oh, wow, like amazing. Oh, like, ooh, wow. Is that? I mean, when I was reading this for the first time, like, oh my God, why do I have to read this stuff? Like, is that really important? I mean, truthfully, is that important to you? So if yeah. So we don't really pay attention to the name, or we don't really care about these people. Who are these people? I don't know, right? And it's not important to me. So what I do is just keep reading it through, and I just get by, and I say, I read it. I read it. But what did you get out of this? Nothing. You literally learned nothing. You got out of nothing. So then why is God counting all these people's name? And remember when we were learning Genesis chapter 5 about the descendants of Adam. Who's who, their sons, and how long they lived. Remember? Chapter 5 in Genesis, which nobody cares. Who cares about, what their son's name were, and how long they lived, and who cares? It's almost the same thing. Like, so, okay, so they counted it, or, okay, so they're the sons of whomever, like, which I don't really care. Why God is actually writing all this? If it is not even important, what's the point? What is he trying to teach us? Well, this is the kind of things that we need to think about. If God said something, he must try to say something to us, but what is he trying to say then? Let's think about it this way. In this world, there's billions of people living in this earth. Do you think people care about who you are and who I am? As much as you don't care about the people out, around the world, they don't care about you either. They don't know who you are. what happens to your life, nobody cares and nobody has any interest. Right? As much as you don't have interest to other people. You don't even know, the people who are living in the 2 houses over from you, like, you don't know who they are. You don't know what they do. You don't know what goes into their life. You don't really care. I mean, I'm busy with my own life, and I'm busy with taking care of myself, not to mention about my neighbors, right? So even 2 houses over, right, and the people living in your town, it's like, don't even care who you are, what goes in your life. But you know what? God counts everyone by their name, who their fathers were, who their sons were. God counts every one of them. Let me tell you, when was the last time you actually watched a movie? At the movie theater, not at the Netflix. Yeah. When was the last time you went to the movie theater and watched a movie? You have to think about it. Okay. If you went to a movie theater, right, or whatever movie that was you watched, right, after you watched a movie, whether it was a terrible movie, it was a good movie, whatever, okay, after you watched the movie from the movie theater, at the end of the movie, right, and there is a credit, and with all the names are coming up. When all the credit lines coming up with the music, what happens to the people? Yeah, in the theater. They leave. Do they really pay attention to those credits or the names of the people who just keep scrolling up? Nobody cares your name. They put a lot of effort in making this movie. Whatever they did in the movie, without them, this movie would not have come out. It's not just the director himself, or it's not just the actor and actress in the movie, but there are other staff who actually put a lot of effort. While they're making this movie, for a period of time that they're making movies, they put a lot of effort into it. The guy who was actually holding the mic and all the lightings, all the stunts, whatever it may be. But nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's like that. It's like a credit goes up, but nobody cares. But for God, God is counting their name, and God knows who their sons were, who their fathers were. God counts them, every one of them, who are going to a war. I know who you are, by clan, father by father. I know who you are. God remembers, while nobody cares. God remembers your name. God remembers who you are. God knows who your parents were, while we don't care. God does. And then he counts every one of them. And Moses did. Moses accounted all these people because God told him to do so. And then continue on from here. So they are counting each tribe. So I'm not going to read all of them, but let's just take a look at chapter 1, verse 20 on. The people of Reuben, the Israel's firstborn, their generations, by their clans, by their father's house, according to the number of names, head by head, every male from 20 years old and upward, and who were able to go to war, those listed of the tribe of Reuben were 46,500. Of the people of Simeon, their generations, by their clans, by their father's house, those of those of them who are listed according to the number of names and head by head, every male from 20 years old and upward, and all who were able to go to war. Those listed of the tribe of Simeon were 55,300. Of the people of Gad, their generations by their clans, by their father's house, according to their numbers of their names, from 20 years old and upward, all who are able to go to war, those listed of the tribe of Gad, were 45,650. The list goes on. When you are reading this chapter 1, did you ever pay attention? Not to mention about, we don't care about what their names were, but they counted by number, each tribe. Do you care? Whether it's a 45,000, 55,000, it's 35,000, 46,000. All right, so what? Well, so what's the big deal here? Right? Same exact word repeated by tribe. Same exact thing. Only difference is the tribe's name and the actual count. Those are the two things changing. Everything else, word by word, exactly the same. So then, so what? I mean, do I care? No. So, let's jump to verse 44. These are those who were listed, which means counted, whom Moses and Aaron listed with the help of the chiefs of Israel, 12 men, each representing his father's house. So all those listed of the people of Israel by their father's house are from 20 years old and upward, every man able to go to war in Israel. All those listed were 603,550. So total is how many? $603,550, right? Which I don't care. All right, so roughly 600,000. Okay, I get it. All right, so these are the people counted, age from 20 and upward, right? Who can go to a war. So even if you actually, fall into this, the age between 20 and upward, but if you cannot go to a war, then you are not counted. If you're a woman, you're not counted. If you're children, you're not counted. If you're old people, you're not counted. If you're sick, you're not counted. So God only counted the people aged between 20 and upward who can go to a war, and only those people are counted as 600,000. And imagine, what about the rest of the people? The women's and old people, like children's and who are sick. They're about roughly, right? Minimum, we would say about 2 million. Or maybe over, right? There's a lot more than 600,000 because there are more people are not counted, right? So if that's the case, okay, 603,550. All right, I get it. And then let's jump chapter 26. Chapter 26. After the plague, the Lord said to Moses and to Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel from 20 years old and upward, by their father's house, all in Israel who are able to go to war. And Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, Take a census of the people from 20 years old and upward. As the Lord commanded Moses, the people of Israel who came out of the land of Egypt were Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, the sons of Reubens of Hanoch, the clan of the Hanochite of Palu, and the clan of Palutites of Hezron, the clan of Hezronite of Garmi, the clan of the Garminite. These are the clans of Reubenite, and those listed were 43,730. And the sons of Palu, Eliab, and goes on. So counts all these people again. And at the end, we're going to jump to verse 51. This was the list of the people of Israel, 1,730. Okay. When they did the first census, what was the number counted? 3,550 were counted, and the second census it counted 1,730. Right? So are we in the ballpark? Are we in the ballpark of the first census and the second census? So when was the first census was done? On the second year, right? On the second year they came out of Egypt, there was a census. And when was the second census done? They were counted right before before they crossed the Jordan. So at the end. So as you were here, as I was reading from chapter 26, verse 3 says, "And Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them in the plain of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho." Right? You know Jericho, right? So Jericho is right there. You're right there. You're almost there. So they counted at the beginning and they counted at the end. The number is almost equivalent. It's almost the same. Right? Imagine. The people were counted in the beginning of the journey and at the end of the journey. These people are two different people. They're not the same. The people were counted in the beginning was the first generation who came out of Egypt. And the people are now counted in chapter 26. They're the new generation. They're second generation. They're the people who's going to get into the promised land. So what happened to those people who were counted or counted at the beginning of the journey? They will die. They all died. Where? In the wilderness. They all died. Who came out of Egypt all died. And the new generations, either when they were child when they came out, or what the people who were born in the wilderness, were counted on the second time. Right?
It has to be either like below 10, 20 years old, right? Or the people who are born in the wilderness is the one who are counted in the second census. If that's the case, you're learning something new here. What are we learning? Who can go into the promised land? Correct. People who are born again only could go in. You yourself die in the wilderness, and only people who are born again could go into the promised land. If you don't die, you can't go in. You have to die in the desert. The life that you are living when you're in this world, you have to die. So, why do we actually receive the baptism? We die with Christ, right? And then what? We die with Christ, and then what? We born again. That's why resurrection is a critical piece of the information. We have to die first, and then we have to born again to get into the promised land. If we don't die, then we can never enter into the promised land. We cannot keep ourselves. So, for the first generations, they were living in Egypt. What did they learn? And the first generation of the people who came out of Egypt, what did they saw? And what did they see? What did they eat? What did they do? When they're in Egypt, the folks who complained, who came out of Egypt, was because when I was living in Egypt, I was eating some food, right? We had a place to live, right? What they saw was worshiping the idols. That's why they actually made that golden calf, because that's what they saw when they were living in Egypt, right? That's what they saw. That's what they did. That's what they ate. They worked, and they got the food, right? They got paid for what they did. When they came out of Egypt and when they were living in the desert, did they work to get paid? No. Did they get to see people worshiping the idols? No, Egyptians are not there anymore. No, they themselves worshipped it, but that's not what they're seeing other people doing. Because the Egyptians, they got lots of God that they serve, right? So the life they were living in Egypt was different than the life that they lived in the desert. It was rough life. So that what they were complaining was, when we're in Egypt, if you let us live in Egypt, then we would have died peacefully. But why did you bring us out of Egypt and put us in this difficulty here? That's what people are complaining about. If you let us live in Egypt, it would have been better. But you're the one who actually brought us out to the desert, and you're going to let us die in the desert. Why? That's what they were complaining about, right? So they kept going to the world they were living in Egypt. The life in Egypt was better than the life in wilderness. Correct. They didn't have to lead by the Lord. They were, working, get paid. They got food. They have a place. They supported themselves, right? But in wilderness, you completely lost the control of your life. You can't control yourself. You can't get any food. You can't get any water. You can't work. You cannot farm anything, right? So how do you live in a desert? Exactly. Complete dependency. You have to rely on God. There is no other source that you rely on. But when they were trying to learn that lessons, they all complained. They all complained because they adored the life before they left Egypt. Right? They wanted to go back to that world. I don't like this life. I don't want to be dependent on God. I want to be in control. I want to do what I want to do. I want to go where I want to go, not where God leads me to. I refuse to do so. What about the people who were born? And what about the people who didn't see much in Egypt that they came out, right? And trained and saw in the desert. What did they saw? Or what did they see in the desert? They couldn't see anything. But you have to totally depend on God to do anything. Food, waters, where we are going, right? God has to provide. There's nothing you can provide yourself. That's what they learn in the desert. The flesh we were living in this world when we were born, before we believe in God, we lived the way we want to live. We enjoyed it. It was okay for us. But after we believe in Jesus, now we have to throw our old self. We have to die. We cannot live after we believe in Jesus. We have to die. And we have to be born again. We have to become a new person. Our old self has to be gone. We have to die in the desert. And then we have to gain the new life in Christ. And those are the people who learned how to walk, how to stop whenever the pillar of a cloud stops, whenever a pillar of a cloud moves, you go and you stop, and is the one who enter into the promised land. That's the story of Numbers. But when he counted for the first time, 600,000, 550 was what was counted. And second census, that was, what was it? Where was it? 600,000, 1,730. Almost the same amount of people. Finally, God brings those people into the promised land. It's almost equivalent. It's not about who's who, how many were counted. What's important is people who are counted from the beginning and who are counted at the end. God brings almost the same amount of people into the promised land. Only people who learned to follow God. That's all they saw. We were living by our own will before we met the Lord. I mean, we still do, right? We do what we think is right, and we still follow ourselves, our own desire. But we're learning the way by meditating God's words. We're learning, I see, as the people who are born again and people who believe in Jesus, this is the life that we need to live. That's what we're learning. That's why it's important for us to know what this means. And then, chapter 1, verse 47. But the Levites were not listed along with them by their ancestral tribe. For the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Only the tribe of Levi you shall not list, and you shall not take a census of them among the people of Israel, but appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony, and over all its furnishing, and over all that belongs to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall take care of it, and shall camp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up, and if any outsider comes near, he shall be put to death. The people of Israel shall pitch their tent by their companies, each man in his own camp, and each man by his own standard. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of testimony, so that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the people of Israel. And the Levites shall take guard over the tabernacle of the testimony, though did the people of Israel, they did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. Now, Levites were not counted for the first census. Why? Huh? They're not counted. Why? I'm asking. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, all right. So, God told him not to include him in the census, right? God told him not to count them, right? But they are counted. So, take a look at Numbers chapter 3. When you look at the Numbers chapter 3, and starting from verse 14, it says, And the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, List the son of a Levi, by father's house and by clan, every male from a month old and upward you shall list. So God counted them, all the Levites. They counted, and at the end, look at the verse 39, all those listed among the Levites, whom Moses and Aaron listed at the commandment of the Lord by clan, all the male from the month old and upward were 22,000. right? They were counted. But the count was a little different. When God told Moses to count the people, their age was 20 and upward. But Levites were like what? A month old and upward. Age gap is much wider. And 22,000 were counted. So God counted them. But what does that mean by don't count them? In chapter 1. Correct. Then why is God is actually counting them differently for these people? Mm-hmm. Okay. Most of people think that the Levites were not counted because they're not going to a war. Right? Because the people who were counted were going to a war and age 20 and up. Right? Those are the people who were counted. And obviously, Levites are counted slightly different because they're counted from, 1 month old over. Right? And because they're not going to actually go into a war, they count it differently, and as you pointed out, because they have to take care of the tabernacle, and they have to remain, right? Yeah, but important part is this. Let's take a look at verse 53, and listen to what he said. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, so that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the people of Israel, and the Levites shall keep guard over the tabernacle of the testimony. There's two different types of people. One type of people, one group of people who go into a war. They're fighting against another, country, right? They're actually having physical fight. Whereas the Levites, they're actually having more spiritual fight to protecting everyone. If this Levite's not doing their job and the wrath came upon them, the Israelites, it doesn't matter which clan you are in, it doesn't matter which tribe you're in, they're all going to be perished. Levi's role is he's protecting everyone else. If the Levite is not doing well in protecting the tabernacle, the whole congregations get wiped out. This people, by the tribes, were counted to go to a war. They're actually having their weapons. They're fighting against another countries or another fighters or another warrior. They're doing the physical fight. Levites, on the other hand, they're fighting against a spiritual war. They have to protect all the clans by worshiping, protecting the tabernacle. So God specifically told them, make sure you cover around the tabernacle. Make sure that there's no wrath come upon the congregation. Protect them. So they were having a spiritual war, whereas the other tribes are going against the physical war. When we go into this world, we actually try to, move away from all this physical fight with people. That's not the only fight we have. We have the spiritual warfare that we have to walk into and fight. And later on, almost at the end of Numbers, there's a perfect example that comes. So when you take a look at chapter 20, 2, there's a story of Balaam. So the king of Moab, Balak, is called Balaam. The reason that Balak is calling the Balaam was because the Moab king saw that other country was trying to fight against the Israel, and then everyone failed. Everywhere the Israelites went, and they just kind of like completely destroys the other side. And then he learned a lesson. I see. There's no way that we can fight against this country, this man, the Israelites. We can't fight physically. So what do? You know what? Bring this guy, Balaam, and put a curse on them. Let's have a spiritual fight. Put a curse on them. I can't have a physical fight with these people because God will protect them. But if we curse on them, then we may have a chance to win this battle. So let's do it. So he called the Balaam to curse them out. But what happened to this story? Let's take a look at chapter 23. Let's take a look at chapter 23. And Balaam said to Balak, build for me here 7 altars, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. Balak did as Balaam had said, and Balak and the Balaam offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Balaam said to Balak, stand beside your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he showed me I will tell you. And he went to the bare height, and God met Balaam. And the Balaam said to him, I have arranged the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, and though you shall speak. And he returned to him, and behold, he and all the princes of Moab were standing beside his burnt offering. And the Balaam took up his discourse and said, from Aram Balak has brought me, and the king of Moab from eastern mountains. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How can I curse to whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce to whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I behold him. Behold, a people dwelling alone, and not counting itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. And Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you a curse to my enemies, and behold, you have done nothing but bless them. And he answered and said, must I not take care to speak what the Lord put in my mouth? So what is the Balak's plan? Trying to put a curse on Israel. Not having a physical fight, but curse on them. That's how he was going to win this battle. He tried it 3 times, and he failed. So there's a 2 story. One is a physical fight. The other one is spiritual fight. So there's the 2 different kinds of war. Levites were there to protect them from spiritual warfare, while other tribes are engaged in physical fight. So are they both in the fight? Are they both in the war? Yes, they are. In different kinds of war. One is a physical, the other one is a spiritual. Chapter 2. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, The people of Israel shall camp each by his own standard with the banners of their father's house. They shall camp facing the tent of meeting on every side. So, God told them how they should be positioning their own camp. So what is the rule here? What is the rule here? Yes, but what is God commanding him? This is a very important verse. The people of Israel shall camp each by his own standard with the banner of their father's house. They shall camp facing the tent of meeting on every side. They have to camp, but the way they camp is they have to face towards the tent of meeting, which is the tabernacle, is where they have to face. They don't face other side. They all have to face towards the tent of meeting. Exactly. Correct. So they cannot camp where they want to camp. They have to face towards the tabernacle. And then he counts, continue on. Verse 3, Those to camp on the east side towards the sunrise shall be the standard of the camp of Judah by their companies. The chief of the people of Judah being Nahshon, the son of Aminadab, his company as listed being 74,600. Those to camp next to him shall be the tribe of Issachar, the chief of people of Issachar being Nathaniel, the son of Zuar. His company is listed being 54,400. Then the tribe of Zebulun, the chief of the people of Zebulun, being Eliab, the son of Helon. His company is listed being 57,400. All those are listed of the camp of Judah by their companies were 186,400. They shall set out first on the march. So, God told them specifically how they should position and where they should be camped for 3 tribes on each side. So the Judah is on which side? On the east side. If it's on the east side, where are they facing? Yeah, they're facing the west side. They're facing the west side. But on the tabernacle, you're on the entrance of the tabernacle. And you're facing towards the west. Right? And then there is on the south side, there are 3 tribes on it, but they're head of those 3 tribes are Judah. Okay? And the south side, who are they? So there are tribe of Reuben, right? Simeon, right? And Gad. They counted all these people. They're on the south side. And then verse 17. Then the tent of meeting shall set out with the camp of the Levites in the midst of the camp as they camped. So shall they set out, each in position, standard by standard. On the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim by their companies, the chief of the people of Ephraim being Elishama, the son of Ammihud. but the company as listed being 40,500. So on the west side, that's Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. The Benjamites on the west side. Okay? And north side, there's a Dan, Naphtali, right? And Asher. There are 3 tribes on the north side. So, verse 30 and on, his company is listed being 53,400. All those listed of the camp of Dan were 157,600. They shall set out last, standard by standard. So they're the last one to follow. These were the people of Israel as listed by their father's house. All those listed in the camp by their camp were 603,550, which is what we counted before, right? But the Levites were not listed among the people of Israel as the Lord had commanded Moses. Though did the people of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses, so they camped by their standard, and so they set out each one in his clan according to his father's house. So this position of where they positioning themselves, where they camp, was set by who? By Aaron? By Moses? No. Lord told them where they should position, how they should be, which group, which tribe should position where. It's all God's design. Right? And it counted all these tribes. Those 3 tribes and how many, those 3 tribes, how many, and whatnot. So let me ask you this. Do you care? Do you? Yeah, the numbers, do you, yeah. Yeah, like, do you care? Yeah. So you don't really care about this, right? Does anyone care? Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay. If nobody cares, well, nobody cares. So let's take a look at it. God positioned them in a certain way and grouped them together in a certain way, right? And God counted all of the tribes. So let's just take a look at, I'm going to share this screen with you. Let me know if you see it. Can you see it? Yes? Alright, so a little bigger. So here's how it is camped. Judah, Issachar, Zebulun as a one group is on the east side, and that's the camp of Judah. Reuben, Simeon, Gad, that's on the south side, and the leader is Reuben. And Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, the leader is Ephraim, they're on the west side. And the camp of Dan, which is on the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, is all 3 groups together. So there's a total of 186,400, 3 tribes together, 151,450 altogether, 108,100 altogether, 157,600, which I don't really care, but that's what it comes to be, 600,000, 3,550 people total. Let's take a look at this. Something interesting, okay? Now, this is the eastbound, right? 186,400 on the east. All right? Now take a look at south. 151,450. Okay? And then west side is 108,100. And north side is 157,600. Okay? So, I want you to take a look at this. So, south and the north is very similar to each other. 151,000 versus 157,000. Correct? And then east is 186,000 and west is 108,000. So there's a significant gap between east and west. You see it? Right? So the south and north is pretty similar to each other. There's only about maybe 6,000 difference. Whereas the east and west, there are about like 80,000 different. Okay? Now, I want you to think about this from this perspective. Okay? This is somewhat important. I want you to visualize this. Let's assume that you have a view of God, for example. God is looking down on them, watching them from above. Right? When God is looking from above and looking down at their camp, all right, then this is what it's going to look like. What does it look like? Which you didn't care about how many people are counted and where they position. Right? The westbound is where the head of the cross. Right? And this, when you look at them, like just to look at the number of people, you see there's like each group. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back here. Now, Judah has 74,000. Issachar and Zebulun has a 54 and 57,000. That make up 186,000. Right? And then the other side, west, is Ephraim is a 40,000, 32,000, 35,000. Right? So when you go back here again, you see this? Judah has a lot more. Issachar and Zebulun has less. Ephraim is a little more. Manasseh and Benjamin is little. But this, who designed this? God designed this. It's not Moses or it's not Aaron. They're not looking at it from the top. They just did what God told them to do. All right, you go over there, you go over there. This is how you position yourself. That's it. When you look from the top down and look from the above, this is what it looks like. And how they move, that's exactly how they move. That's exactly how they're moving. We may not care about the counts. We may not care about the positions. Who cares about which side they're in? Who cares about which tribes are in? Who cares about the number of tribes? Nobody cares. But from God's perspective, He does. And for 40 years, that's how they've been moving. Whenever God moves, the entire cross moves. And at the end of chapter 2, how did he end? Verse 33 and 34. But the Levites were not listed among the people of Israel as the Lord had commanded Moses, though did the people of Israel according to all the Lord had commanded Moses, so they camped by their standard, and so they set out each one in his clan according to his father's house. They did it because God told them to. Tony missed the whole thing here. So who can? All right, all right. Let's yeah. Let's just show them. Let's just show them. Okay, so counted all the tribes, and God positioned them to a certain, directions. Right? It is not what Moses designed. Is not what Aaron designed. This is what God told him to do. So He grouped them, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun in one group, and positioned them to east. And Reuben, Simeon, Gad on the south, and Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin on the west. And then Dan, Asher, and Naphtali was on the north side, which nobody cares. And all this number, right, I don't care. This total number, I don't care. But one thing you have to pay attention to this is this. First of all, the total of 186,000 on the east, right? And when you look at the west side, 108,100, right? So there is a pretty big gap between the east and west, right? And the south and north is 151,000 and 150,000, so about 6,000 difference, right? Yes? But the east to west is pretty big number difference, 80,000 difference, so there's a big gap. So when you actually put this in a picture, it comes out like this. So this is the east, this is the west, this is the south, this is the north, and this is the tabernacle in the middle. And everybody facing where? everybody's facing towards the tabernacle. This is what God sees from above. The people at the ground can't see. They just position the way they've been positioned. That's all that's how they position themselves. But from the above, when you look down, this is what God sees. And for 40 years, this is how they've been moving everywhere. So for those are the things that we never counted or never considered or never cared for this number, right? When you look from the God's perspective, it means something to God, even though it doesn't mean anything to us. All right, so up to here. Any question?